Welcome to Telling Assorted Life Lessons with Juan Rodriguez. That is, telling all. The purpose of this podcast is to express gratitude to everyone along my journey to show that with time and grace there are lessons to be learned from any interaction. And my vision is that I will be someone who can embody empathy, gratitude, humility, and vulnerability to prove to others that you won't burst into flames if you're just a little vulnerable sometimes, if you're willing to take a step back and just take a look at the big picture and see if there are lessons to be gleaned from the good, the bad, and the truly ugly, so to speak. The way this show will operate is, of course, the pilot, the intro episode, is me just giving the lowdown on what you can expect in the weeks to come. It will be a bit of a hybrid show. So I will have guests on, family, friends, teachers, mentors, coaches, people who have helped me learn or glean lessons from situations where my head was too buried in the sand to even see a way out, let alone grasp the positive that could be extracted from these things. And simply put, it'll start with, who it starts with. And I'll open the show with, hey, here's a lesson you taught me. Have I ever taught you anything? And the conversation will just flow. And for the solo episodes, which you can expect, will be me diving into media, whether that be books, movies, video games, or what have you, music especially, to glean some of the lessons that you might get out of that, a line that always stuck with me, or in particular lyrics that always stick with me that come out at the worst times. We all know somebody who speaks in movie quotes and such, and I've always been enamored by those folks because you get the sense that it struck something deep in them, and that's why they carry it around all these years later. It's a beautiful thing. Gratitude, that is. Being grateful for the wholeness of the human experience, simply because without joy there could be no sorrow. Without up, would we know what down is, left or right? I don't believe in opposites per se. I believe things exist on a spectrum, and it's the extremes that bring us gratitude for when things are a little more level, so to speak. So, let's start with me. My name is Juan Rodriguez. I am 32 years old as of the recording of this episode. It is March 12th, 2024. I am an open book to most people, a powerful voice in the dark to some others, and a vulnerable man, almost by default these days. It's a way of living that I've come to embrace because it invites vulnerability from others, and sometimes that can just be the spark to get someone to look inward, just knowing that it's okay, that someone's done it before, laying out a blueprint, so to speak. I am a married man. It'll be 4 years in September. And I have a wonderful wife. I've got a wonderful family. You can see the dog bed down there. I've got a wonderful little guy. And our house is full of pets. We've got 4 birds in the other room who are all being wonderfully quiet today. But all that to say that if you knew me 10 years ago, I'm a completely different person. And it's through the willingness to embrace adversity and suffer willingly, I suppose is the best way to put it, knowing that it's all for a purpose, that has led me to take more time to reflect on things that were buried away, experiences, conversations, things that the young mind couldn't accept. Whether from a place of defensiveness or arrogance, thinking I knew better. You find that the more you learn, the more you realize just how little you know. And that is a feeling that I've embraced wholeheartedly. But simply put, I hope to have conversations with people that have taught me very important things in my life and see if they knew that that's what they were teaching me in the moment. And maybe we can double back and I can get their experience and see what it was like for them. Because sometimes Just sometimes you say something and you have no idea the profound impact it might have on the person listening. And it might have been a throwaway line for you, but it could also be something that someone carries for the rest of their life. I mean, for example, I've read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius more times than I probably should admit. But one line that always sticks out for me from this book was pretty profound. I put the book down and I went for a walk. And the line was, accept whatever comes to you woven in the fabric of your destiny for what could better suit your needs. And I took that to heart. And that was a big picture kind of moment, because if I hadn't gone through everything I went through, I wouldn't be the man that my wife fell in love with. I could say, yeah, I would, because all those things were intrinsic, but truly, there's no way of knowing, and I don't intend on wasting any brain power thinking about the road not traveled. I guess if I were to quote Jungian psychology, I would call myself a wounded physician, or the colloquial wounded healer. Like Chiron could heal others but couldn't heal the wounds inflicted upon himself. For Chiron, it was a poison arrow, and Zeus made him a constellation to kind of maintain his immortality but separate himself from the pain of his mortal form. Bit of a non sequitur. And now that I begin to heal the wounds within myself, most of which were self-inflicted, I'm starting to see just how capable I am of just being present for friends and family and strangers alike, and kind of being able to bring them to the present, so to speak, because too often I feel like people are lost in their minds, whether they're trying to make sense of something that happened or solve an issue or a problem, and not knowing how to ask for support. And the beautiful part of that is, when I first read Tupac's The Rose That Grew from Concrete in the 8th grade, thanks to a friend of mine named Leon who lent me his paperback copy, I realized that even one of the most hardcore rappers, one of the most gangster, take no nonsense kind of gentlemen's had a softer side to him. And it's not that the gangster image was a facade, that's something that he had to adopt to survive. And that resonated with me growing up in Bridgeport. Not able to be so vulnerable because the bullies would see that vulnerability in themselves reflected in you, and rather than embrace that, they would assault you. There's lessons to be learned from that. I mean, I grew up with a strong moral compass. Once I hit my growth spurt, for example, I could not abide anyone being bullied. I would jump in and I would just make a fool of myself because I couldn't live with someone else feeling the way I felt back then. Yeah. And this dictionary I've had since I was in the 7th grade, and it's the key to my lexicon, my vocabulary. It has helped me express myself in more complex and also much simpler ways, because sometimes you draw a word that is perfect for the situation, but someone could misinterpret it and the entire conversation is just tilted, so to speak. There's no getting back to where it was because of a misunderstanding. So I learned what it meant to be patient and to come at people where they are and try to match them energy or vocabulary wise, just so that understanding could be found. And I believe understanding is something that might as well be a fundamental human need. Too often you see people disconnected and disjointed, and it's very simple from my perspective. No one's listening to them. No one's trying to understand. They're just being dismissed. Nonsensical, crazy, delusional, right? But these are things that happen when people have tried every which way possible to express something simple, and they overcomplicate it when the simple fact of the matter is seek help elsewhere. Because a lot of those individuals don't seem to have any problem expressing themselves. It's just a simple matter of no one around them listening to understand instead of listening to respond, to tell them how they're wrong, how these things didn't happen. But there are lessons to be gleaned from these situations as well. Choosing your company better, choosing your words, and ultimately when you're on the other side of these things, realizing that it was never on you in the first place. It was somebody refusing to accept accountability. And that's the other aspect of this show. I would like to take accountability for my reactions during some of these life lesson moments. Because how wonderful would it be if we as a species could just stop in the moment and acknowledge when we're defensive or closed off, and acknowledge, I see the wisdom that you're dropping at my feet, but right now I'm doing my best swine impression, and I'm going pretending that I don't see the value in what you just said because I want to be right, you know? So it's a simple solution. I guess I work backwards and say, hey, sorry that I didn't take this to heart then, but I promise you after I took that walk, it sank in. Or maybe it sank in years later, and I never got to acknowledge you and the strength that it took to put me in my place, so to speak, and let me know that I didn't know everything back then or today. And just because I read a bunch of books and I knew all these things and these concepts, it didn't mean that I knew how humans operate, because there's practical knowledge and then there's practical application, and there's just a giant gray area in between, you know? And a lot of the lessons, I mean, you can get them in self-help books like 12 Rules for Life. I mean, this bad boy right here changed me in one of the best ways. I'm just reading it and listening to it and then reading it again and highlighting in the margins and trying to break down what he was getting at, even though it's very straightforward. And I only got this book because I thought Peterson was something different because of Facebook and social media. And then you look into it and you find out he's not what they say at all, right? And the same thing applied to his book. People were disingenuous with some of the rules, so to speak. Like, oh, clean your room, ha ha ha. But the rule was actually closer to set your house in perfect order before you go out and criticize the world, which I'm all for. I'm also all for cleaning your room, because of not having a clean room growing up, scattered and such, you know, singlets over there and cleats over there, and just always in a state of disarray, you start to realize that your mind is in a state of disarray. So a lot of the people that I know that are anxious and all these other things, you know, adjusting your environment might give you a big boost, so to speak, because I know that it did for me. And setting your house in perfect order just means don't criticize others for how they live and how they do things, when there's so many areas that could use your attention, starting in your own home. And to me, that was always just a waste of energy. Why am I going to shake my fist at the moon about something going on that I simply can't control, and my voice might be able to contribute to? Sure. Yeah. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, and that's who someone else is today. If I'm competing with myself, there's no loss, ever. But when you're competing against other people whose inner machinations you could never possibly understand, I mean, you're setting yourself up for failure. But I think the one that was really important for me was treat myself like someone I'm caring for. So after reading this book, we got our first dog. I was always taking care of my spouse much better than I was myself because deep down I didn't think I deserved it. And that is a very, very difficult lesson to learn for some folks. But one of my favorite lessons comes from a movie we just saw, the second part of, but a book that I've read quite a few times in my youth. And it's a warning against charismatic leaders. And that's something that has stuck with me since I was about 13. Simply because I had seen so many people blindly follow someone that was charismatic who honestly had no idea how it was going to play out. But because they were so sure of themselves, people always followed them, whether it was carpentry or some yard work or taking some new way somewhere. Just because of the charisma, no one ever questioned it. And it always made me laugh when inevitably things would go to hell in a handbasket. And the other important factor of that is the main character of that book, Paul, doesn't start out that way. He has to make choices for the betterment of humanity. And he does not like who he becomes during these very key moments in the story. And the first book's events play out for the rest of the books. And that taught me about the grand scale of things. Sometimes there are ramifications beyond our lifetime that we can't hope to understand. And I hope that this podcast can be similar for me. Timestamps, stamps in time of where I was, who I was speaking to, the love that can be gleaned from dialogue and understanding. And someday I hope to leave my own impression on the art of dialogue and communication, and in my wildest dreams be someone that did it well. Did it for the love. Did it for the art form. So yeah, you can expect episodes every Tuesday morning. There will be solo shows where I discuss a book or a movie or a series of books or movies, and I just let you know, without spoiling too much, if you've never seen the movie or read the book, what I gleaned from it. And then other weeks, there will be me and a guest, often over Zoom, some in person, and I get to love on them and express my gratitude for everything they've done. And ask them if they've had any life lessons that stuck with them, because mine are plentiful, but maybe I can still pick up some new ones, you know? Kind of be pretty cool, I think. But in any case, I think I've rambled enough. Don't think I've touched on everything I'm supposed to. But it's literally the first episode, so thanks for joining me. And we'll talk to you very, very soon. Take care.